And then there was one. The number of new coronavirus infections is lower than ever in Victoria, but it's no time to relax.
We're seeing numbers that are the envy of the world. That can change very quickly if people don't do the right thing.
Also tonight, the investigation into the Ruby Princess debacle broadened. A Tamil family seeking asylum to stay in Australia for now. And Bulldogs vice-captain Locky Hunter facing charges following an alleged drink-driving crash and lockdown breach. Good evening, Mary Gearin with ABC News. Victoria has recorded its smallest jump in coronavirus infections since the crisis began, but the government is standing firm on restrictions. Just one new case of COVID-19 was confirmed overnight, despite nearly 3,000 people being tested yesterday. Premier Daniel Andrews says now that the numbers are becoming more stable, it's possible elective surgeries could start again soon. The government has again loosened the purse strings, pouring an extra $70 million into TAFE as student numbers drop. Here's state political reporter Bridget Rollison.
Carpentry classes at Holmes Glen TAFE don't look dramatically different. But social distancing rules mean less students can attend practical classes.
Good afternoon, how are we all today?
In other TAFEs like Kangan in Docklands, all 160 automotive classes are now online.
It's been challenging, but we're very proud of where we've landed. So we are delivering right across the board, across all of our courses, remotely now.
But the TAFE says there's only enough theory work to last a few months, which is why the state government has announced $68.9 million to keep the sector running. The training system's been hit hard with a lack of international students and many local students unable to pay their fees.
On the other side of this virus, TAFE, skills and training are going to be more important than they've ever been.
In some good news, Victoria's virus infections remain stable, with just one new confirmed case overnight, the lowest recorded increase.
We're seeing numbers that are the envy of the world. That can change very quickly if people don't do the right thing.
The Premier says talks are underway about restarting some elective surgery, which will be a focus of the National Cabinet meeting next week.
I think we can get some elective surgery going again fairly soon, but we've got to do it safely.
Among the state's new facilities to treat COVID-19 patients are 25 separate pods designed and built in a week at Monash Medical Centre.
What this facility allows us to do is to provide really intensive high-level care to very sick, critical patients at the same time as protecting and keeping them isolated.
The state government is preparing to borrow another $24.5 billion. It claims will save lives and jobs. But the opposition wants to know exactly how that money will be spent.
We have to get value for money. This must be a recovery based on jobs and business-led recovery, not waste and bureaucracy.
A debt that will take generations to pay back. Bridget Rollison, ABC News, Melbourne.
Meanwhile, the state government has been forced to clarify that golf is still banned in Victoria, despite confusion sparked by a health department staffer late today. The sport is permitted everywhere except Victoria and the Northern Territory, but an email from the department's COVID-19 directions team said golf was not specifically prohibited as long as people maintained distancing and played with just one other person from another household. The email said clubs should be encouraging people to play golf locally. But late today, the department said that was a misinterpretation by a staffer.
I'd love to be playing golf, we all would, but I don't need to play golf, and me playing golf is not worth someone's life.
While there's been some protests from, among others, former footballer Sam Newman, the government says the ban will stay. There's a bit more activity in Australia's skies tonight following the government's $165 million airline lifeline. It'll keep routes into all capital cities airborne through subsidised flights from Qantas and Virgin. But there are concerns the latest assistance doesn't go far enough, with regional centres at risk of seeing empty airports shut down. Here's Andrew Robertson.
A Virgin flight touches down in Melbourne after the government provided $165 million to get some domestic planes back in the air. 220 flights a week, with those who've been in quarantine after arriving from overseas uppermost in the government's mind.
If they landed in Sydney and required to get back to Perth with very limited services available, it's a long drive in a hire car over the Nullarbor.
For loss-making Virgin, which is billions of dollars in debt, getting some of these planes back in the air may offer some short-term relief, but there's a real risk that many will stay grounded permanently.
I'm here on their behalf today to ask the Prime Minister to step in and to save Virgin Airlines.
As a group of Labor MPs gathered at Brisbane Airport to support the thousands of workers who'll lose their jobs if Virgin goes to the wall, unions, Virgin management and industry experts were meeting online and calling for the government to take a stake in Virgin.
There are over 600,000 people in the tourism industry here that rely on a healthy, robust and extensive airline network.
If we have a monopoly situation in this country, evidence shows that airfares will be between 20 and 30% more.
With potential buyers of Virgin circling, the government so far is refusing the carrier's request for a $1.4 billion bailout. While Virgin's fight for survival has grabbed the headlines, the airports that both it and Qantas fly to are also being hit hard. They're empty. And for many regional areas, such as Dubbo in Western New South Wales, it's a huge issue.
We're the headquarters for the Royal Flying Doctor Service. We've also got a large RFS contingency here. We've got an essential airport for Western New South Wales. We need to keep that viable.
The pressure continues to mount on Canberra to loosen the purse strings even further. Andrew Robertson, ABC News.
Police have dramatically broadened the criminal investigation into the Ruby Princess cruise ship. They'll now quiz all passengers and crew on the cruise immediately before the voyage that resulted in a massive coronavirus cluster.
Prime position.
Wow, we're on the 14th floor.
On an earlier voyage of the Ruby Princess. This was the cruise before the ill-fated trip, linked to 20 deaths and more than 600 infections. Passengers from both voyages will now be drawn into a criminal investigation.
This is going to be an investigation like no other, because of the sheer numbers of those that will be providing evidence.
Almost 6,000 people will be sent this electronic survey and asked what they saw while on board.
The investigation itself will focus on any allegation or any information pertaining to criminal negligence.
More than 150 passengers from the first Ruby Princess trip reported feeling sick when they disembarked in Sydney on the 8th of March. Those waiting to board the second cruise that went on to have the outbreak asked staff if anyone had been unwell.
The answer was definitely no. No one was quarantined and no one was sick.
Travellers say they had to wait 7 hours before boarding as the ship underwent a deep clean.
I straight out, point blank, asked them, I said, does this have to do with coronavirus? Are there any cases on board? Have the previous passengers? And they just, lovingly, just with a smile said, there are no issues.
New South Wales Health says no known cases of coronavirus have been linked to the earlier cruise, but it's unclear if that includes overseas travellers who returned home or crew who remained on board.
We've always had issues with that first cruise because New South Wales Health allowed that cruise to depart, despite knowing that there were unwell people on board in the middle of a pandemic.
4 more Ruby Princess crew members have tested positive, taking the total of 6 staff members to 153. Police believe the source of the outbreak was probably a waiter or an employee involved in serving food. When that crew member got sick and who knew is the likely linchpin in this investigation. Amy Greenbank, ABC News, Sydney.
In the US, the enormous economic toll of the pandemic continues to mount, with new data showing more than 22 million people have filed for unemployment benefits in the past 4 weeks. It comes as the President unveils new guidelines to try to get people back to work. North America correspondent James Glenday reports.
From coast to coast, unprecedented numbers of Americans are turning up at food banks after taking a hefty pay cut or being laid off.
I don't have any income coming in. I don't get any food stamps. So it's just hard to get any help right now.
Another 5.2 million filed for unemployment benefits last week. The global financial crisis of more than a decade ago is looking like a blip compared to the past month. More than 22 million in total have now lost their jobs.
That's about the size of the population of Florida in just the last 4 weeks filing unemployment claims.
The President, who's under growing pressure, today put forward guidelines on how to get the nation back open for business.
We are not opening all at once, but one careful step at a time.
His administration will pay to rapidly ramp up testing, and it wants states to ease social distancing restrictions in 3 distinct gradual phases, though it doesn't specify when this should happen.
Instead of a blanket shutdown, we will pursue a focus on sheltering the highest risk individuals, so important.
The announcement represents a backdown for Donald Trump. In it, he finally conceded that the White House doesn't actually control coronavirus lockdowns. State governors call all the shots, and several of them have made it crystal clear things won't be getting properly back to normal for a long time. Amid the carnage here, one industry is booming. Some funeral homes are offering drive-through casket viewing.
And it's not a lot of interaction with people, but I think they are liking it because they do get to say goodbye to their loved ones.
For the 3rd consecutive day, more than 2,000 were killed by the coronavirus across America. The country's total death toll is now more than 31,000. James Glenday, ABC News, Washington.
The Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea has been tested for coronavirus. It follows a worker testing positive in the Pandemic Operations Centre there and comes amid concerns that the country's health system can't handle an outbreak. PNG correspondent Natalie Whiting reports.
This has been the headquarters of PNG's COVID-19 response. But today, it was the focus of response efforts, locked down while staff inside were tested for the disease.
A woman who tested positive visited the National COVID Operations Centre because she works with the National Quarantine Inspection Agency.
That positive result has sparked a frantic testing operation, with this temporary facility in Port Moresby swabbing dozens of people who visited the operations centre in the past week. That includes members of the media, as it's where press conferences have been held.
All the reporters managed to have their testing done today, and we have been told that we will have results ready in at least 3 to 4 days' time.
The Prime Minister and members of his cabinet have been giving updates from the centre, and so they have also had to be tested.
For precautionary measure? As a precautionary measure and to show we mean business and are serious, I have been tested.
The Prime Minister's sample was flown here to Brisbane for testing today, and the results are expected by this evening, but they're yet to be announced. The PNG government says testing across the country will be ramping up, and all samples will now be sent to Brisbane because of a shortage of testing supplies in PNG. The first case in Port Moresby is one of 5 new patients detected across the country. 3, including a 12-year-old boy, are from the region that borders the Indonesian territories of West Papua, which has long been seen as a likely coronavirus entry point. Additional health facilities are being set up in PNG, but they may not be enough.
If we aren't aggressive to stop the virus from spreading through stopping people moving around, then our hospitals and health systems don't have the capacity to deal with the outbreak.
A confirmed case in Port Moresby, a crowded city where for many social distancing is impossible and clean water and soap isn't always available, is a serious concern. Natalie Whiting, ABC News.
Well, as Australians bunker down to help flatten the curve, authorities are discussing long-term strategies for a return to normal life. National Science reporter Michael Slezak looks at what an exit strategy might look like.
How does a nation in the grip of an emergency shutdown find a way out?
What we need to do is keep the restrictions in place and then slowly lift them.
To get people back on the streets, the Prime Minister says we need to do 3 things. The first is more testing. So far, we've just been testing people with symptoms of COVID-19 or other high-risk groups like return travellers. But now we need to try to test everybody. It's called sentinel testing, testing different people in different ways.
We might also test a sample of the community on a regular basis just to check whether the coronavirus has spread into the community and people are infected but they don't have any symptoms.
One very different way is to examine what's going down the toilet.
To spot an early outbreak that might occur that we might miss through other forms of testing. Also, the degree of viral load we might find in the faeces could give an idea of how severe the outbreak is.
The second part of the exit strategy is contact tracing. Once a person tests positive for COVID-19, massive nationwide teams track down everybody that person has interacted with. Small teams used to track cases of measles or HIV have been dramatically expanded. The government's also developing an app that will help authorities find anyone who's been in contact with confirmed cases. Today, refusing to rule out forcing everyone to share their location data.
I've always been a believer in the Australian people making the right decision, and so I think a voluntary approach at first is definitely the way to go.
Even with all those measures in place, outbreaks are still possible, and then the response becomes important. Australia is now in a much better position to contain an outbreak than it was when COVID-19 first arrived. We could see further use of the Defence Force, which was called in to help address an outbreak in Tasmania this week. Whatever the case, experts say patience will be required.
What this is really about is finding a way to fine-tune the degree of lockdowns, not in terms of finding our way out of this COVID-19 situation, which is going to go on for a while.
Michael Slezak, ABC News.
Convicted Australian drug trafficker Cassie Sainsbury has been released from a Colombian prison less than 3 years into her 6-year sentence. It's thought she may have been released on parole because of coronavirus concerns in the Colombian prison system.
Cassie Sainsbury is back in the spotlight again. After almost 3 years behind bars at a Bogotá women's prison, she's been released on parole.
Everything that I've been through in prison, everything that I learnt, I wouldn't change it because it's made me a stronger person. It's made me who I am today.
The former personal trainer from Adelaide says being jailed in South America has changed her forever.
I can say that I grew as a person. I've grown up a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about people. I've learned how to analyse people better.
It was April 2017 when Cassie Sainsbury was caught with almost 6 kilograms of cocaine hidden in her luggage at Bogotá's international airport. The then 22-year-old claimed a mystery man named Angelo tricked her into carrying the packages, which she thought were headphones.
I was told that my family and partner would be killed.
Facing up to 21 years in prison, she agreed to a plea deal which cut the sentence to 6 years. She's now walked free after serving less than half that sentence. Her former lawyer, Stephen Kenny, says 4,000 prisoners have been released in Colombia in an effort to reduce overcrowding and prevent the spread of coronavirus.
I'm aware that there has been a couple of deaths of coronavirus in the prisons in Colombia. And so I'm sure they're very keen to remove as many people from the jails as possible.
With the world at a standstill due to the pandemic, Ms Sainsbury won't be able to return to Australia anytime soon. She'll reportedly spend 27 months on parole. Shubha Krishnan, ABC News.
A Tamil family at the centre of a lengthy immigration legal battle will remain in Australia for the time being. A federal court decision today ruled the youngest daughter's case for asylum was not afforded procedural fairness.
It's a ruling that's given this young family another lifeline.
Priya, her words were, it's a happy day today. You could hear the smile on her face and they're definitely feeling some relief today.
Priya, Nadez and their 2 Australian-born daughters were living in the central Queensland town of Biloela before being taken into immigration detention 2 years ago. The federal court has today ruled the younger girl wasn't given procedural fairness to apply for a protection visa.
We do see this as another small step to getting them home.
Both parties have been given a week to agree on an order.
We would hope that time is taken to reflect on the decision and the way it was handled and consider whether potentially there's a reasonable way that we could end the hardship for this family.
In a statement, the Tamil Refugee Council said The government has spent millions of dollars attempting to deport the family to Sri Lanka. Right now, the whole world is focused on saving lives. Why is our government still focused on destroying the lives of this family? This must end.
It is open, and it's always been open, for the minister to consider releasing the family back to their community.
The family will remain on Christmas Island, and if the parties can't agree, the case will return to court. Rachel McGee, ABC News.
3 crew members from the International Space Station have returned to Earth to find a very different home planet from the one they left more than 6 months ago. The 2 Americans and 1 Russian touched down in Kazakhstan. They were greeted by a recovery crew to help them adjust to the increased gravity after months in space. Returning crew always go through a rehabilitation program, but this time the Russian and American support teams have also put in place an isolation regime to protect the travellers from the coronavirus. Farmers who produce niche and gourmet products are being forced to explore new markets now that high-end restaurants have shut their doors. Producers are calling on the nation's foodies to source their delicacies in different ways. Sarah Jane Bell reports.
These ducks were destined for the tables of Melbourne's top-end restaurants. But when coronavirus shutdown measures came into effect, sales at this free-range farm plummeted.
Within 24 hours, we didn't have a business.
The Clarks supplied 20 restaurants. All have shut their doors. Now they need to reduce their flock of more than 2,000 ducks.
If things continue, we won't have a duck on the farm within a month.
All the luxury items that go into restaurants, they would all be having problems.
Ducks aren't the only delicacy where sales have taken a dive. Tom Eady and Kristen Simpson purchased this truffle farm near Ballarat at the end of last year, on the expectation they would bring in more than $100,000 through sales to restaurants and tourism. But the cracks in the market are already showing.
We obviously can't rely on that as a source of our potential income.
The question for farmers now is how to find a home for this produce, experimenting with a range of new platforms from social media to farm gate deliveries, paddling to keep these businesses afloat.
The challenge is making that connection to the consumer and letting the consumer know that you can actually try and experiment with different products, different ingredients.
The Clarks have found a new but significantly reduced market with butchers.
I just put a lifeline out to them and asked whether they'd be able to support us through this and take ducks to sell to the general public, which isn't normally what our market is.
And truffle farmers will be trialling products like freeze-dried truffles when harvesting begins in late May.
It's a bit of an experiment and could be quite expensive, but given the value of our crop, we think it could be worthwhile.
Calling on the nation's foodies to try fine dining at home. Sarah Jane Bell, ABC News, Ballarat.
To finance now, and global share markets jumped today, even though China revealed its first fall in GDP in more than 4 decades after President Trump laid out a plan to reopen the US economy. Here's Alan Kohler.
China is always the first to report GDP each quarter, and it was the first to lock down because of the coronavirus. So while the rest of the world will be waiting for the June quarter GDP to see the damage, for China it was the March quarter, and GDP contracted by 6.8%. China started reporting quarterly GDP in 1992, and it's always since then kept growth above 6%. The last time it acknowledged a fall in GDP was 1976. The timing difference between China and the rest can be seen in this chart of share market indexes: the Shanghai Composite, the Australian All Ordinaries and the US S&P 500. Now, the Chinese market had its fall at the end of February after a 2-week closure, and it wasn't very much of a fall by comparison. The ASX and New York markets are climbing out of a much deeper hole. And they took another step out last night and today after President Trump laid out a plan to reopen the US economy. It was up 0.5% in New York, but more than 3% in Japan and Korea today, and 1.2% in Shanghai. It was affected by the GDP number. The Australian market went up 1.4% today, with Qantas and Sydney Airport leading the way after the Morrison government agreed to support the airlines. Virgin Australia, however, stayed in a trading halt. The US oil price slipped below $20 a barrel last night, while other commodities didn't move very much at all. And the Australian dollar bounced back above 63 US cents. And finally, just because it's Friday, here's a graph of the relative importance of a few things at the moment that's doing the rounds on social media. Up are the internet, alcohol and sweatpants, what we'd call tracky dacks. Down are the car and shaving. Toilet paper was up and now down, and coffee unchanged, right up there at the top. And that's finance.
Of course. The Western Bulldogs vice-captain Locky Hunter will be charged on summons for drink driving after an incident in Melbourne South last night. Hunter is accused of crashing into 4 parked cars at Middle Park. He left his car at the scene and was later found at a home in South Yarra, where he was breath tested and allegedly blew more than double the legal blood alcohol limit.
Concerned by both of them and regard them as very serious. And the need for people not to drink drive is one thing that everyone connected with the AFL has had reinforced to them on multiple occasions.
Hunter has had his licence suspended for a year and has also been fined $1,600 for breaching coronavirus directions. Time for the weather now. Here's Paul Higgins.
And Mary, we have another cool weekend lined up, but it won't be as wet or as windy as the last couple have been. So that's something. 11 millimetres of rain fell at Wilson's Prom overnight, but no more than a millimetre or 2 elsewhere. Down as low as -1 at Mounts Buller and Hotham. Today, a couple of millimetres in West and South Gippsland, and quite windy along the Gippsland coast as well. It was warmest at Hopeton, Oyen, Walpeup and Warwick-Nabil, all in the west with 22 degrees. A Melbourne City high of 18.4 at 2:36 this afternoon, and no rain, but in the south, Cerberus and Geelong had around about a millimetre. On the deserted streets outside right now, it is 16 degrees. Hobart had wind gusts of 93 kilometres per hour this afternoon. It was Sydney's warmest day in nearly a month, and up in Brisbane for nearly 2 months. You can barely make it out, but a weak cold front actually moved through Bass Strait today. That reinvigorated the showers near our coast. This band of cloud right across the middle is travelling along a jet stream. Now, the wind near our coast should ease tomorrow as that high gets a bit closer to us. On Sunday, it'll be ridging across Victoria, so a settled day then. The next cold front is due on Monday. So tomorrow, a shower or 2 in our west and south. On Sunday, some morning showers near our coast, and then on Monday, some scattered showers for most of the state. Saturday will be sunny in Sydney and Canberra, but Perth will be cloudy. In Brisbane, they're expecting afternoon showers and storms. Adelaide's in for a few showers, and in Hobart, a shower or 2. Well, back home, a shower or 2 for us tomorrow, mostly in our west and south, and it will be a cloudy day for much of the state, after some morning fog patches inland as well. A west to southwest wind will keep the day to the teens, partly cloudy in the northeast. Light to moderate west to southwest winds will still be fresh along the Gippsland coast. On the bays, westerly winds 15 to 20 knots in the morning, southwesterlies below 10 knots for the afternoon. A gale warning for the Gippsland coast, strong winds on the central coast. Well, Coolum becoming clear over Melbourne tonight, but an overcast Saturday's lined up with a shower or 2 around, only up to a millimetre of rain, 11 through to 17 degrees, and that westerly wind will start to ease in the afternoon. Sunday, early fog patches and a partly cloudy 18, still a chance of a morning shower in our southeastern suburbs and light winds. Monday, 19 with showers, 5 to 10 millimetres of rain. On Tuesday, a partly cloudy 20, 21 Wednesday with a morning shower or thunderstorm likely. Thursday, 21 again and mostly sunny, and looks like the chance of a shower coming up next Friday with a high then of 22 degrees, Mary.
Thanks very much for that, Paul. And that's it for this evening's bulletin. We'll leave you tonight with the sounds of a Melbourne choir singing together in isolation. Each member recorded their parts at home and with some editing magic were brought together in vision and voice, singing this Carole King classic. See you again tomorrow night. Good night.